Welcome back, everyone. Joining us now is Hannah Becker, Senior Associate, member of Gray Robinson's nationwide alcohol, beverage, and food department. It's an exceptional practice that assists licensing and alcohol and food challenges around the country. So Hannah is going to talk to us today about tasting, toasting, Zoom virtual tastings, mixology classes, and experiential events. What a perfect topic for what we're living in today. Thank you for joining us, Hannah, and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. As mentioned, my name is Hannah Becker, and I'm very excited to be with you all. And we're going to discuss basically the title of this, which is Taste, Toast, Zoom. And I hope that kind of gives you a clue as to what we're going to talk about. And I think it makes sense to start off with virtual tastings, just because a lot of the state agencies have put out advisories or at least some sort of formal or informal approval of virtual tastings, either for suppliers or retailers, and lead it onto other mixology classes as well as other virtual events. So before we get into what I just discussed, kind of like as a summary, I wanted us to kind of set a goal for ourselves, and that's to gain insight into the legal restrictions and requirements applicable to virtual consumer events involving alcohol that are organized by licensed on-premise retailers. So as mentioned, we'll start on the next slide discussing virtual alcohol tastings. And pretty much all of the guidance that I'm going to talk about on this slide will apply to other virtual events. But alcohol tastings, as I had mentioned, a lot of the state agencies have already put out publications or express approval. And virtual alcohol tastings isn't a new thing. It just gained a lot of popularity, and it's an easy way for retailers to establish or continue that relationship they already have with their patrons. And alcohol tastings allow either the retailer's employee bartenders, or in some cases it's led by a furloughed employee, or in some cases the bartenders do it themselves. But for this purpose, I'll be discussing the ones that are organized by licensed retailers. So for best practices that would apply to alcohol tastings as well as other virtual events like mixology classes, it's very, very important to first confirm that the virtual event that you're organizing is lawful under either the state's alcohol beverage laws and regulations or one of the temporary emergency rulemaking that have been passed, or policies that have been set by the applicable state agency as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The other aspect that you need to keep in mind are the costs relating to the alcohol tasting or the virtual event that you're putting on. Some states are going to require that you put a cost to the alcohol that you're selling, because in some states you can't give alcohol free of charge to consumers. And in other cases, you can also choose to give a list of ingredients that the consumer has to purchase, instead of you selling as the retailer the alcohol to the consumer to enjoy during the virtual event. Another requirement that TTB, as well as some states, including California, have imposed when it comes to virtual tastings is that the alcohol that's sold and that is eventually delivered or is shipped to the consumer, or if you are not allowed to do either one of those transportation actions is picked up by the consumer, it needs to be sold in a manufacturer sealed container. And there's a number of jurisdictions that have allowed retailers to seal containers containing pre-mixed cocktails. So in those types of jurisdictions, then you may be able to package your own pre-mixed cocktails. However, that's not going to be the case for every jurisdiction. And lastly, and very important, is how you're going to get the alcohol to the consumer prior to the alcohol tasting or mixology class. And that involves you reviewing the state's alcohol laws, regulations, as well as the temporary emergency rulemaking or policies set as a result of COVID-19. And in some states, you're going to be allowed to deliver via your own employee or third party. And in other cases, you can ship the alcohol to a consumer in your state, and in very limited circumstances and limited states, you can actually ship across state lines to another state, and would allow you as an out-of-state retailer to do so. But that's in a very small number of states that would allow out-of-state retailers to do that. Moving on to the next slide, and as mentioned, for mixology, virtual mixology classes, a lot of what I just went through would, when it comes to considerations, would also apply to virtual mixology classes. But I wanted to take the opportunity to first highlight the fact that tied house laws, as well as cooperative advertising laws, do apply to virtual events. Even though they're virtual, you still cannot, as a retailer, request that the supplier, a manufacturer, or a wholesaler pay for your advertising, help you advertise the virtual events. And of course, you can't request that they pay money or support in any other way the virtual event that you're promoting or organizing yourself. And I'm also going to take the opportunity, because virtual mixology classes can be organized in different of ways, and it could involve the licensed retailer having their bartenders basically lead the consumer through the course, or the retailer could not be involved at all, and then the furloughed or unemployed bartenders would go on social media, or they would use Zoom or any other video conferencing app to put together a virtual mixology class. Other ways that you can structure such virtual classes would be that you don't sell alcohol, and instead you provide a list to the consumer attendees to purchase alcohol on their own and purchase other ingredients. You can directly sell the alcohol and the ingredients to the consumer and deliver or ship it. And there's other considerations that if you just tweak the facts or the way that you've modeled your virtual events will impact what the legal considerations and restrictions and requirements are. So I want you to leave today's presentation and kind of think of how you have planned or how you've heard other virtual classes structured, and think about how your state or other states' alcohol beverage laws would apply in those different structured virtual events. And lastly, in the next slide, I just want to sum up with other virtual events that could involve like a live band or a DJ, or what they like to call virtual dance parties. And if you think, there's just so many different possibilities for virtual events that licensed retailers can organize. And as I mentioned, there's pretty much the same exact considerations, legal considerations would be taken into account. And I'll go through a couple key measures. The first one is age verification. So at the point that your patrons want to sign up for the virtual event, they should age verify, put their date of birth, and indicate that they're at least 21 years of age or older. And that's especially important if you're going to be selling alcohol to the consumer. But even if you're not, if the attendees are planning to consume alcohol during the event, it's prudent that you make sure that everyone attending is at least 21. And then of course, if you're selling and delivering or selling and shipping, you need to make sure that your employee or the third-party agent that's delivering the alcohol confirms that the consumer receiving the alcohol is at least 21. If you are choosing to also include food as part of the virtual package, or you plan to deliver the food to consumers prior to the event, then you need to also confirm that you hold the appropriate food licenses and permits at the state and local level, and that you're complying with all food delivery laws and regulations. Another thing that you should think about are setting internal and very clear safety measures, and you can also consider requiring attendees to sign a liability waiver. And then it's super important that you continuously, especially if you're organizing the events consistent with temporary regulatory relief measures, that you look to make sure that the expiration dates and or you look to the expiration dates to make sure that what you're complying with is actually still valid. And lastly, a thing I thought of when it comes to live like DJ or band events is the fact that if you're going to have the band or the DJ perform from and live stream from your licensed premises, that they are complying with all local and state COVID-19 related restrictions or requirements that are imposed on your licensed premises, as well as kind of monitor the volume, I would say, of the music, because you would like to, I would think, avoid any potential inspection by local law enforcement where they think that what you're having is a large gathering when you're really only going to have a couple employees and a band. And that pretty much concludes our short presentation. And I'm really hoping that you feel that you've left either this short presentation, or at least during our live Q&A, that you've gained insights into the legal restrictions and requirements applicable to virtual consumer events involving alcohol organized by licensed on-premises retailers. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Hannah, that's fascinating information. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure many people will want to join that deeper dive for a deeper discussion. These are things we just don't typically think about, and we must. And just real quick, you know, I think the other thing that I just snapped to when you were talking about the DJs and things like that is the music licensing requirements that also might be something to think about. Is that a fair consideration to add to the list?
Very fair. Definitely add it to the list. And I would like to hear from everyone else when we have the live session, if they can think of any other legal considerations that they think might be applicable to virtual events.
Great question. We'll look forward to that. Hannah, thanks again. We'll look forward to your deeper dive session. Have a great day.